Can you make modular sump using your printer? Not a 3D printer, your printer that prints. Welcome back, guys. Okay, I know it's a bold opener, but it's not clickbait, believe me. You've heard me mention this in previous videos, so now we're going to make it. The generally perceived method for making sump is to mix green tinted resin and pour it into a painted structure you've made or bought. This makes a little pool that hardens. You've seen this before. It's semi-transparent. You can pour it over barrels and junk and into recesses, and it looks pretty cool. But you can't actually sink miniatures into it because it's not jelly or goo, and well, why would you want to do that anyway? So other than looking quite realistic, it doesn't really serve any other functional purpose. It's visually aesthetic, but ultimately ornamental. And to make it work, you need to dig a hole in your terrain. On tiles, this means you need to raise the tile on something like foam so you can excavate into it for a resin pour, which then means you need to raise all the other tiles you make, sump swamped or not, to match the ground height. And that's where it stays. You can't move it around. It's a little green pool on that specific tile forever. What if it goes wrong? Resin can have a mind of its own. What if you change your mind? What if after a month you want it somewhere else? The other option is to raise the sides and form a hollow well of sorts. You've seen this before, as quite a few terrain companies make these. The ones with the raised sides always tend to look like a little puddle in a crater, let's be honest. Like a tiny flattened apologetic volcano with a cold. But what happens if you've got a battle mat? Or a similar foundation? It's flat. There's no hole you can dig. And crater puddles would look completely weird and out of place. Whatever you make also has to be flat, and as flat as possible, because anything raised up too high would look wrong. Flat sump. Yeah, doesn't seem to make much sense. Yet that's what I wanted. Modular, movable, flat sump that works on a battle mat. And I wanted it to have barrels floating in it. So let's make some. Best way to think of this is like a picture frame, but an incredibly flat picture frame so it doesn't look raised unrealistically high and stays flat to the ground. First thing we need to make is the sump. And the sump can be nothing more complicated than finding a picture on the internet, tinting it greeny yellow and printing it out. I'd always recommend finding a royalty-free image just to avoid any copyright issues, even if you only plan to use this on your own table. It's just safer. If you're pretty good with a painting program like Photoshop or similar, you can make your own from scratch, like I did. But if not, I'd recommend finding a base picture that you can use or paint over. Here's a quick way of doing it, with only 3 layers. It's basically the water image that you found, which you open in Photoshop or your preferred painting software, and then add a hue adjustment shifted into the green spectrum. And then a solid yellow colour fill layer in multiply mode to shift the whites of the ripples to yellows. It'll work, but it's not exactly exciting. This is the sump I decided to create. I don't want this to be a Photoshop tutorial, as that could be a whole other YouTube channel, because I've used this software commercially since 1991, and I'm lucky enough to have hard drives full of textures and stock images that I've collected over the years from making movie posters and computer game artwork, so I'm going to assume a level of knowledge with the paint program. I'll do this around A4 or US letters. That's the main size of printers that most people have. If you've got a larger printer, go bigger. Open a new document at a large size. I used 1654 pixels by 1240 pixels. Yeah, it was completely random because, well, this started as a test. I set the resolution to be 150 dpi, as I've kind of found that's a pretty good compromise on my printer between quality and file size. The sump is basically a bunch of layers with different effects on top of each other. The first layer is just an olive green fill. The layer above is exactly the same green fill, but with a noise layer to give some grit to the sump, and then it's blurred slightly. Above that, I've added another olive green fill to tint the noise to remove any of the reddy brown colours, setting the layer overlay to be hue. This is the main base for the sump. The next layer is just made with a big soft brush at 50% opacity and painting random swirls. Then take a smudge brush at varying sizes and push it around, randomly. The next 4 layers are done exactly the same way, just different shades of brown and green. And just like layering on a miniature, you paint smaller areas on top of what you've already painted, and then smudge it, so that it overlaps and mixes together. Now let's bring back the green noise layers and see what we've got. Okay, looking good, but still looks a bit like a painted Photoshop job. It's a bit dark, so we can lighten it up with a brightness layer. The next layer is just a free ripples image from the internet that I turned black and white. And I set the overlay mode to screen to knock out the black, so only the white ripples show. I added a masking layer to this so I could erase areas where I didn't want the ripples. Then use the yellow colour fill to tint all the white ripples to yellow. We then want to add some more transparent ripples in other areas, so duplicate the ripples you just made, delete the mask you had, set the mode to screen to knock out the black again, and set layer transparency to 10%. Take a big soft eraser and remove what you don't want. You can see on this layer that I just erased big chunks of it. I then added a vignette, which is just a brown circle gradient squashed a bit and used in overlay mode at 20%. The final layer is to bring back the green vibrance, as it's lost something with all the layers. This helps when you print because not all of us have calibrated screens to our printer at home, so you can just adjust the layer brightness for test prints. I actually made a few options to see what I liked. Once you've found a swampy water texture or made your own and are happy with the look, you can just duplicate it to fill the page. A4, A3, just print as big as you can so you can cut it up later to the size you want. You can absolutely print this on glossy photo paper, but I found that it can scratch easily and ruin all your hard work. So I decided to use a thick acetate sheet to go over the matte print. Not that thin floppy acetate, the thicker stuff. This actually gives it a look that appears to have more depth than it really has. And it helps save the printout underneath from damage. You can wipe coffee off it easily. Yeah, that happened. Now, you want to cut everything to the shape you want and glue the acetate to the printout. Annoyingly, acetate only really glues to paper with super glue, so you have to be careful not to let it spread out underneath the acetate, or you'll get little white marks when the glue's dried. So use very small amounts in the thinnest way possible. Don't worry too much if you get white bleed marks on the glue, because you can always cover it up with Citadel Nurgle's Rock Technical paint. Once you've got your shiny flat acetate sump glued, you can make the edges. Cut up thin strips of 1mm thick card or plastic card. Card's cheaper and the end result looks no different. Measure the length of the sides of the sump that you want and cut 45-degree angles in the strips so they'll fit together like the sides of a picture frame. Decide what else you might want to add, like grating or pipes. I used this plastic sheet used for crochet and stitching and just cut a ragged shape. Colour everything you just made to match your terrain. Spray, pens, pencils, it doesn't really matter what you use to get colour on the model. And give it a coat of varnish. Only varnish these bits. Don't varnish the acetate, it doesn't need it and can ruin it. Now glue everything in place. These edges you've just made will help cover up any of the white glue marks left from the super glue on the acetate. If there's still some showing after, just Nurgle's rot that to cover it up. On these ones, I just added railings by clipping off the bottoms and gluing them to the sides, and some hazard stripes that I also printed out. On this one, I needed a few sides to be completely flat so I could overlap columns and walls. This meant I had to leave sides unglued so I'd get no white glue marks visible. To keep the acetate and paper together on these sides, I used some pipe ends. I cut a small hole in the acetate so I could glue the pipe to the paper underneath and to the acetate, which held it firmly together. And these floating barrels? also modular. They're just barrels cut in half, glued to acetate circles and rounded shapes, and have Nurgle's rot painted on as ripples, so I can move these around and put them where I want. This method will work for whatever you want sticking out of your sump. Rusty metal rebars, junk, dead bodies, anything you want to be movable. And it gives a 3D effect without any of this actually being 3D. The good thing about this not being resin is you can print it out as many times as you want, make as much sump as you need, and depending on the design that you want, you can make rivers, pools, puddles, even entire rooms filled with sump. And with entire rooms, you don't even need to glue the acetate to the paper. Just lay them on top of each other and add the walls. And it'll always work on a battle mat or flat terrain. Flat, modular sump made with an inkjet printer. Just as effective and so much cheaper and less messy than resin. Thanks for watching, guys. Sorry this video took so long, but it was pretty complicated to figure out how to shoot this, so thanks for being patient. I'll catch you in the next video.